Usually at the beginning of an episode, we give you some history. But sometimes to understand the history, you have to understand the science as well. Perry and Marie Curie were a husband and wife team of physicists who made history when they discovered radioactivity, a term Marie coined to explain how the emissions of rays from uranium compounds were built into the structure of its atoms. Using this hypothesis, the couple worked together and in 1898 discovered two new elements in the periodic table: polonium, named after Poland where Maria was from, and radium. In 1903, the couple received the Nobel Prize in Physics for their groundbreaking research in radioactivity. And in 1911, Marie won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the discovery of the two new elements and the isolation of pure radium. Both she and her husband are buried in lead-lined tombs because their bodies are still radioactive. A physician by the name of Sabin von Soschaki worked with the Curies in some of their research. He was well acquainted with and understood that radium carried great danger if handled improperly. While studying with the couple, he once remarked, "I would not care to trust myself in a room with a kilo of pure radium, as it would burn all the skin off my body, destroy my eyesight, and probably kill me." Perhaps that remark was due to the incident in which his left index finger was burned badly with radium, and he cut it off in order to stop the necrosis. However, once he returned to the U.S., he created a luminous paint using radium, and then founded the U.S. Radium Company in 1914. This radium-infused paint played a big part in the war effort, but later made headlines for its horrible health hazards.
I'm Darlene.
And I'm Melody.
This is Hard Times and True Crimes.
So, Darlene, tell me about your coffee deal now.
Oh gosh, it's been so basic this week. I've been very busy. I've just been running out the door with 2 shots of espresso and some cream. That's about it. How about you?
Well, I don't have the special coffee maker you have, but, Tim usually brings me my coffee in bed before he goes to work.
That is so nice.
Well, he retired. So now I'm getting up and making the coffee.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's not true, actually. I'm getting up and pressing start on the coffee maker. He does he fixes it the night before, but I just have to actually get out of bed and get my own coffee. Yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah, I have been barely getting my 2 shots in.
You're a working woman now.
Yes.
Okay, so this week is actually Rad Tech Week.
Okay.
Do you know what that is?
I have no idea.
Okay. So my daughter Bailey is a rad tech.
Okay.
That is a radiologic tech. Let me see if I say it right. A radiologic technologist.
Okay.
Radiographer. They actually take x-rays.
Yeah.
They don't read them. The radiologist reads them, but they take them. This week is Rad Tech Week.
That is so cool.
It is. So I guess in honor of that, that's what my episode today is going to be about.
All right.
So do you want to take a guess of what it is?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Should I know?
No, but I wasn't sure. I thought there is a book out, and I thought, you may know exactly what I'm going to do.
I have no clue.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Okay, so I'm just going to jump into it.
Okay, all right.
A quote from a man named Sabin von Soschaki in 1921 to an article in the American Magazine. He says, "Locked up in radium is the greatest force the world knows. Through a microscope, you can see the whirling, powerful, invisible forces, the uses of which we do not yet understand. What radium means to us today, a great romance. What it will mean for us tomorrow, no man can foretell."
Oh my goodness. This is not about the girls, is it?
It is.
Oh, I'm so excited. This is, okay, I don't know a lot about it, so I'm really excited to hear it.
And I think there's a movie now. Have you seen that?
There is a movie. No, I haven't.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right. So in the spring of 1917, a group of around 70 women sat at long tables inside the U.S. Radium Corporation factory in Orange, New Jersey. So these ladies, they painted watch dial numbers with a mixture of water, glue, and radium powder. The luminous paint would come to be called Undark because the scientific miracle glowed at night or in dark environments, making devices easier to read. It was dubbed the greatest find in history. Almost like the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Right.
The women felt lucky to have landed a job in the factory, which provided clocks, watches, and instrument gauges to the military. This was part of the war effort because at that time, World War I was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And the work paid well, better than many jobs available to young women at that time. And they were paid by the piece. So they would get 1.5 cents per piece. And if they did a lot, they could earn around $2,000 a year.
Oh, wow. And that was a lot of money back then.
Yes, actually, it said some of the women made more than their fathers did. Actually, they said, I read that it would equal around $40,000 a year today.
Okay.
So for a woman during that time, that was considered
great money.
Yes. Because of their enjoyment of work and the good pay, many of the women encouraged their family and friends to also seek employment at the same company. Within a few years, U.S. Radium had reached peak operations with around 300 or more employees. Some of them were, several members of the same large family.
Okay.
While painting the watches, these fine camel hair brushes that they used, they would dry after a few strokes or so and lose their shape. And so the women would then would wet their brushes using their lips or tongues and then keep going. Mm-hmm. This technique that they had been trained in was called, they termed it lip, dip, and paint.
Okay.
And it made their job quicker because they didn't have to actually stop and get water or use anything to clean their brush. And, it didn't waste as much paint. And that paint was costly.
Right.
Also, the job was fun. And the girls' enjoyment extended to after hours when they discovered their clothes, hair, and even their teeth would glow.
I did see that movie.
You did?
Yes, because I remember now the girls painting they would paint their faces.
Yes.
And it would glow, and they just thought it was the coolest thing. I watched it with Memphis.
Okay, cool. And so, that's what they did. They painted their hair or their fingernails. Mm-hmm. One woman, maybe more, painted her teeth right before she went out on a date. She was going to knock him dead.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. They said that sometimes on Friday night or Friday, mm-hmm. the girls would wear their best going out dresses to work all day so that when they left, the residue left would make their dresses glow for the weekend when they went out. Talk about a glow up.
Right.
Because it literally did glow. Because of this, they were dubbed the Radium Girls, even then, just because of their after hours entertainment with it. According to their employers, it was perfectly safe. In fact, they were told it might even benefit them. The reality is that scientific and medical literature was already warning about the dangers of radium exposure. Even a pamphlet from the U.S. Radium Company, which they distributed to hospitals, had a section called Radium Dangers, Injurious Effects.
But before that, wasn't it considered like they would put it in water and put it in different things and it was like a health tonic?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So the women did not know of any dangers at that time.
Sure.
And who wouldn't enjoy painting with a substance that glowed in the dark?
Right. Especially at that time.
Right. Yeah. And I can understand that fascination a little bit. When Tim and I went to Puerto Rico a few years ago,
right,
we went to this bioluminescent bay. Have you ever heard of those?
No. Tell me about it.
Well, you can kayak out in the water and at night, and there are these plankton in there that glow in the dark, and it's just all in the water, and it's beautiful.
Wow.
And we took a trip with a place that instead of letting you kayak out there, they took you out on a bigger boat and they let you swim and snorkel.
Oh my gosh.
At night. It was the coolest thing.
Wow.
When Tim came out of the water, his beard was dripping with these glow in the dark things.
Really?
It was amazing.
That is so cool.
But we were swimming in.
Were you scared?
No, it was
Okay.
so fun. We were with a tour group.
Okay.
And it was
That's
not
awesome.
not afraid a bit. But this water was teeming with all of that plankton. And it's called dinoflagellate plankton, I think.
Okay.
They said, well, that's not, they're not in high enough numbers to be a health hazard.
Okay. Hopefully.
I know. So I know you're like, yikes. Well, that kind of sounds familiar. But
Right.
anyway, so I can understand because it's just so cool.
Yeah.
And during that time, 2 more factories were opened that were using the paint.
Mm-hmm.
One was in Ottawa, Illinois, and the other in Waterbury, Connecticut. The products had become so popular that radium was used in many products. And like you said before, it was even touted as like this miracle cure for these various ailments. Actually, I want to read you an advertisement for it. Radium emanation water drives out uric acid. Suffering from too much uric acid and diseases caused by faulty elimination? Rheumatism, gout, periodical headaches, neuralgia, constipation,
Oh my gosh.
auto intoxication, and lack of bodily vigor, quickly relieved in a natural way without drugs or chemicals by our new discovery, the way to make radium water in your own home. And it goes on to tell how it works. And these were ads in the paper.
That's insane. It just makes me think of all those ads today. You know, that we still have those ads for various things. The newest thing is like the Shilajit stuff. Have you heard of that?
No?
Yeah.
What is that?
Some kind of resin that's supposed to change your whole life.
Oh,
So have you heard of radium glass?
I have not. What is that?
Oh my goodness. So it's glass that was made back then. It's just various pieces of plates, cups, like saucers. They would make little knickknacks like boots,
Yeah.
little things like that. So yeah, my daughter-in-law actually recently asked me, would you like some of that for Christmas? Because we see it all the time and I just think it's so cool because it glows.
Are you going to get some?
I want some because I just think it's cool. But I will say, like this lady, because I follow her because I'm just fascinated with it, on she's on Instagram and she has like a whole cabinet of it. And Journey's dad had a boot. Like
Wow.
like a lady, boot like they had back then, a knickknack.
Yeah.
And he put it on the TV and like their TV, like it messed it up. Yeah.
All right. Somebody write into our Facebook group and talk Darlene out of getting this stuff.
They say that it's not, I mean, this has been around forever and people have had it, like passed it down. And I've read that it's supposed to not be dangerous.
Okay.
I
well,
won't lick it.
That's what you've been told. So let's just hear this episode and see if I can change your mind.
Okay.
Toothpaste and cosmetics containing radium were
gosh.
sold. Heating pads and suppositories.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Toys that glowed in the dark.
Oh, that's terrible.
They actually had one called...
No wonder everybody has cancer.
Right? There was actually a toy that said, Find My Radium or something. It was a toy kit, and it had a Geiger counter in it. And so you were supposed to hide the piece of radioactive material, the kid was, and then they used their Geiger counter to go hunt for it.
Oh
Kind of like a metal
gosh.
detector.
Oh my gosh. That's just crazy.
I mean, yeah. And even health spas offered a nice long soak in radium-infused mud baths.
Oh my goodness.
And there are still radium spas today in Europe.
That is insane. And yeah, we wonder, like, where is all this cancer coming from?
Really? And so again, they were saying, well, it's in small quantities. It's in small quantities. They say it's helpful and it cures things and stuff. I don't know.
I feel like any kind of like liquid form of it, you know what I mean? That could like get on you in any way that can't be helpful.
Good.
Like the glass, it's like trapped in there.
But you also have to wonder, are we in 20 years going to find out our cell phones are giving us the same?
I'm sure. That's
Stuff.
why my mom, and I've started doing that too. I hardly ever speak it's always on speakerphone.
Okay.
I don't want it
Do you
up
sleep
to
with
my
it beside
ear all
your
the
bed?
time. Yes.
See, me too. Mine's right beside my head every night.
Me
Beside my
too.
head. I'm like, maybe this is not such a great idea.
And I've probably already done damage because for years I did have it up to my ear, but probably for the last 2 years. But my mom has never. She will not. She's always used speakerphone.
Well, there you go. She's probably
If you
right.
call her with a secret, you better say, am I on speaker?
And see, the little booklet that comes with your cell phone, it says, that it's in small amounts, that it's negligible and it's just fine. But they don't know.
They don't know. I was going to tell you this really quick. Well, you think about the asbestos that they had back then, the radium, and then me, because I was such a bright child, I, with my teeth, bit lead paint.
Oh, no.
From doors, like chewed it. Like, you know how, like, because it would peel?
Oh, my gosh.
So I would take it.
That explains a lot.
Doesn't it? And I only realized that like in the last few years, like, oh my gosh.
It makes you wonder how any of us really have made it.
Yes.
Oh, goodness. Okay, so this newly discovered element, it's all the rage because it's got all these fabulous uses. One historian today wrote, "The spectacular properties of this element and its envisioned uses were heralded without restraint in newspapers, magazines, books, lecturers, poets, novelists, choreographers, physicians, and even the U.S. government. Stomach cancer could be cured, it was imagined, by drinking a radium concoction that bathed the affected parts in liquid sunshine, quote unquote."
Oh my gosh. And they were probably smoking their Camels all at the same time.
Oh, I know.
Gosh, that's awful.
It really is. It gets worse when you hear, if you haven't already heard this, but you remember. So today, obviously, we know that radiation can cure cancer.
Right.
But under a doctor's care, not by ingesting it.
Right.
Or painting your face with it. At this point in history, the knowledge was so far behind where we are today. Now we know that radiation doesn't discern between the bad and the good cells.
Right.
It does kill the bad cells and the good ones with it. During this time, the scientific community, they did know the dangers, but it was so new that the average person didn't. And the authorities on the subject, they believed that the benefits outweighed the risks.
Yeah, because, have you ever heard of the immortal cells of Henrietta Lacks?
What is that?
Okay, so Henrietta Lacks, she was a Black woman from the 50s who found out she had cervical cancer. And so Johns Hopkins, that hospital, Johns Hopkins, they treated her. And they took radium.
Oh, no.
And put it
in?
Yes.
Oh, no.
And so it did severe radium damage to her, burned almost all the skin off of her abdomen.
Oh, goodness.
It did horrific. Ew, yeah. They also did radium therapy because her husband had given her gonorrhea.
Oh.
And yeah, anyway, so the radium ultimately failed and spread her body so much that her cells are in a lot of our vaccines and stuff like that. They said if you take those cells, they've been able to keep them. They would wrap around the earth 3 times. That's why they call them the immortal cells of Henrietta Lacks.
Whoa.
You've got to read that book.
I will. I'm definitely going to
yeah, and a
up.
lot of that spread was caused from radium.
Let's link that in the show notes too.
Okay, definitely.
I have never heard of that, so thanks for telling me. Wow, that's crazy.
Yes.
Oh, so anyway,
Yeah, sorry.
I'm glad you shared that. In 1921, 4 sisters secured employment at the U.S. Radium Company. Albina, Amelia, known as Molly, Quinta, and Irma Maja. They were 4 of 7 sisters. They, along with some of their co-workers, were enjoying their new job at the factory, or studio as it was called. But before long, they began experiencing various ailments, including fatigue and toothaches. Molly Maja sought the care of a dentist when her toothaches became so agonizing she could no longer stand it. Her dentist, Dr. Neff, he would treat her teeth and gums, but she just got worse, no better. And anytime he would do any kind of take a tooth out or something, the wound wouldn't heal.
Okay, now were her teeth rotting or
no? What was happening was they weren't rotting, but they were disintegrating.
Okay.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'll give you a little more detail on that in a minute. By 1922, Molly was still ailing, and Dr. Neff, he wasn't certain of the cause. So he tested her for syphilis, and that test came back negative. And he began to suspect maybe her job dealing with this radium could be the culprit.
Mm-hmm.
However, when he requested from the company to get the ingredients of the paint so he could test it, they refused him because it was like this top secret, stuff.
Oh
It was all under
gosh.
wraps. By the fall of that year, Molly was housebound with her jaw, the roof of her mouth, and her facial bones becoming one big abscess.
Oh my gosh.
And it was at this time that they tested her for syphilis again, and that one came back positive.
Okay.
But he had to do some surgery on her jaw. And when he pushed on her jawbone, it just crumbled like ashes.
Oh.
And he ended up digging her jawbone out with his fingers. It was so soft.
Oh my gosh.
So what had happened was the radium had stripped her bones of all of its calcium.
Because she's licking.
Yeah, she's putting it in her mouth. And what it does is it seeps into her teeth. Radium and calcium are in the same family. And so it seeps into her bones and kills the red blood cells. And they get bone cancer, but it starts in their teeth. And
Oh my goodness.
so she was losing her jaw and her facial bones.
So she had bone cancer.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Finally, the disease, whatever it was, because they didn't know yet what I just told you, it reached her throat and it resulted in a tumor in her jugular vein,
Oh my gosh.
which eventually hemorrhaged and choked her to death. She died choking to death in her bed. And that was at the young age of 24.
Oh my goodness.
A slow and painful death, to be sure. In addition to her dying, now there's this cloud of venereal disease as the cause.
Oh, bless
And
her
that kind of
heart.
hung over her reputation, right? But one thing Dr. Knepp, he did, when he removed that jawbone and he had to dig it out, he had like this one big piece of it. He still had it. He kept it. And he did end up later using that to do some testing.
Oh, okay.
So keep
Cool.
that in mind.
All right.
Meanwhile, just days after her death, one of the other radium companies, the one in Illinois, advertised their need for watch painters in their plant. Girls as young as 13 were hired to do the job. 13, 14, 15-year-old women. During their training, one of their instructors, Mercy Reed, ate the radium with a spatula in front of the girls, assuring them, it's safe. She said, I have been promised this would never hurt me.
Oh, no. And I'm sure she really believed that.
Yes.
You're going to believe the corporation that you're working for that's helping your family over a girl that has syphilis.
Right. And that's exactly...
Especially during that time.
That's exactly what the companies wanted you
Right.
to do. That's right. But more and more girls were noticing their health ailments and they were declining. So the dentist in that area, they had been wondering, if this condition from phosphorus exposure could be the problem. They called it phossy jaw.
Okay.
So that's what they were suspecting at first. But now they were kind of like no longer sure because so many of these girls coming in with these same problems all worked at the U.S. Radium Corporation.
Mm.
It was also around this time that Sabin von Soschaki was ousted from his own company by Arthur Reeder.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1925, a turning point came. The new medical examiner of Essex County, New Jersey, his name was Harrison Martland, he got wind of that there was a possible radium toxicity. The way he found that out was one of the top chemists from the radium company, I'm going to call it USRC, Dr. Lehman, he had died of pernicious anemia. Now, Martland, along with the previous founder of the company, von Soschaki, the one who had been kind of ousted, they began researching the possibility of radium poisoning, and they used an electrometer to test the bones of Dr. Lehman, and they found significant radiation in his bones.
Wow.
That was actually the first time that type of testing had been done in humans, and so it really made medical history during that time.
Okay.
So working with Dr. Neff, they also tested that jawbone that had been removed from Molly. And the findings confirmed radioactivity that caused radium necrosis, and that prompted them to exhume her body.
Oh, goodness. Okay. I'm so glad. I hope she got her reputation back. I mean, I know she does by now, but...
Well, keep listening.
Okay.
Once her corpse was dug up, her bones were found to be highly radioactive, literally glowing.
Oh, my goodness.
But her body showed no signs of syphilis.
Really?
Yeah.
So that test probably wasn't.
Either it was faulty or who knows.
That's very interesting, isn't it?
It's a little suspicious.
Okay, so was it their doctors that gave her the test?
I'm not sure who gave her the second test. The first test was given to her by her doctor, but I do know there were times when the company doctors would see the girls.
And in the movie, I remember the company doctors.
Okay, I will get to them a little bit. So I'm not sure who gave her that second test, but it is a little sus.
It definitely is.
Because there was no signs of that found when they dug her up and did that.
Okay.
And now, what's more, her sisters, who also worked at the company, they're dying from the disease as well.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And so how many of them are there?
So there are 7 sisters, and 4 of them work at the company. And she has passed away. So there's three of them that worked there left. The medical team wanted to test live humans as well, and they needed a volunteer. So a young woman named Sarah Carlo, who had also worked with the Radium company, she was having symptoms, the bone pain, the fatigue. So she let them give her a breathalyzer test.
Okay.
She breathed 3 times the amount of radon that should have been present in her system. And sadly, she died very soon after that too. And that was reported in the New York World. And then, of course, you can imagine word begins to spread at this point. So to prevent the shadow that this is going to cause on his business, Arthur Reeder, the new president of the company, began working on damage control. He purportedly paid his top chemist and doctors and some of his local doctors to maintain that there was no way that radium that affected the chemist, Dr. Lehman, who had been handling large quantities and sometimes rather carelessly he handled it. They said there's no way that could have impacted these girls because they were only dealing with small quantities. And those doctors backed him up, and he, some people say he paid them to say what he wanted to say, which makes you question whether he was the one that tested her for that syphilis.
Yes, absolutely. But I mean, the girls are eating it. I mean, they're putting it in their mouth.
Right. I don't care how small of a quantity. And if you think about it, it's not small quantities. They're doing this every single day.
And it's liquid.
Yes.
Like
this radium powder mixed with this. Yeah. Yes, but it's like a paint.
But it's like it can absorb.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah.
That just breaks your heart because, they were probably so excited to have those jobs.
Yes.
Probably living their best lives, not knowing.
Yeah, I mean, these were girls in their late teens and early 20s. So the company's trying to discredit the medical examiner, Martland, and trying to discredit those girls, which hence the accusation of syphilis too. But the proof's in the pudding.
Yeah.
Sarah Carlo's right foot had diminished by 4 centimeters due to bone loss.
Whoa.
And her bone marrow, it wasn't like healthy yellow and white. It was like dark and red, muddy looking. Like I told you earlier, how the radium deposits into the bones like calcium would do.
Yeah.
And then it kills those blood cells. And so that's why so many of the people before thought they had anemia. That's why Dr. Lehman's death was considered pernicious anemia, because that's what the disease looks like. Looks like you're anemic, but really it is basically disease of your bones, bone cancer. More and more of the women are struggling with abscesses of their teeth and gums, constant pain and fatigue, limping, aching bones, and then, of course, like I just said, anemia. Now they're really starting to question the safety assurances that their bosses are giving them. They're like, they'll ask, "Are you sure this is safe?" And they're always told, "Oh, yes, it's safe."
Are any of these women having children during this time?
No.
Thank God. Well,
they can't.
I was going to say, because won't that affect your fertility, right?
Yes, it makes them sterile.
Okay.
Now, some of them had children before they started working there.
And then they weren't able to have children.
But no, they could not. It did make them sterile.
Okay.
Okay, so that was all happening in 1925, but I do want to back up to 1922.
Okay.
So another one of the employees of the USRC, her name was Grace Fryer. She had also gone to her dentist with a toothache and that abscess in her jaw, and she had some x-rays taken that showed serious decay, not only in her mouth, but in her backbones as well. She was puzzled by the cause because, again, they had not put it all together in 1922. It was just starting to kind of be figured out.
Sure.
And she was concerned because her teeth were falling out.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're a young girl, you don't want your teeth falling out.
Right.
And so one of her doctors suggested, well, maybe it's your job.
Especially if they're disintegrating.
Yes.
How scary would that be?
And they think they have gum disease and you're this young girl.
Yeah.
Her doctor did suggest, well, maybe this company you work for. And she did say, well, I did find it strange that when I blew my nose, the handkerchief glowed.
Oh my gosh.
When she finally came to understand this probably is what happened
Right.
when I was working, she was no longer working for them, but she realized that might have been it. She decided to sue the company.
Oh, good.
It took her 2 years to even find an attorney who would take her case.
Wow.
But she finally did find help in the form of an attorney named Raymond Berry. He was an attorney from Newark, New Jersey, and he took her case on a contingency basis. And 4 other women who worked at the plant quickly joined that lawsuit. They were Edna
Good.
Hussman, Catherine Schaub, and then Albina Larice and Quinta McDonald. Both of those were sisters of that Molly that died.
Okay. And they joined as well.
And they joined that as well. So the 5 women now are called the Radium Girls, but for much different reasons.
Yes.
So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about each woman. So we already talked about Molly. She was the first to die of the radium poisoning. 8
Okay.
months after her first toothache, she died.
Wow. That was fast.
8 months is fast, yes. And we already know that they painted her in that bad light, blaming her death on syphilis in an attempt to discredit her. But her friends refuted that too before it was even proven that she didn't have it. Albina Larice, who was her sister, she was older than Molly, but at only 4 feet 8 inches tall. So she was a tiny little woman. At the time of that lawsuit, she was considered the most ill of the women.
Okay.
And then there was the other sister that worked there, Quinta McDonald. She was the 5th of the 7 sisters, which is why she got her unusual name of Quinta.
Right.
So Quinn means 5th. My sister, who's also the 5th child of us 6 siblings, her name is Quintina.
Really?
Yes.
That
So-
is so
Yeah.
cool.
Hey, Quinn, hope you're listening.
You better be. No, I'm
That's
just-
right. Quinta McDonald's husband was known to be violent, and he actually had threatened to kill her once, and he even struck her once while she was on her deathbed with this disease.
Are you kidding?
No, I'm serious. She filed for divorce, and then the judge told him to try to work it out. Because
What?
I think back then that was probably a pretty
Yeah.
common thing. And so they did say she had a deathbed reconciliation with her husband. Like he supposedly asked forgiveness and she forgave him.
Probably got married so quick. Her head would have spun.
Yeah, probably. Especially if he got any settlement.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Oh, I hope he didn't. Oh, goodness. I didn't even think about that. That's probably why he reconciled with her.
Well, at least when she died, she knew that she wasn't harboring any
Yes.
unforgiveness. And so she died with a clear
Conscience.
heart. Yeah.
Yep.
Then there was Catherine Schaub. She was age 26. She had this vivid blue eyes and this bobbed red hair. She had a slim build, fashionably dressed, and she loved to dance. After being given the news that she would die within the year, she offered up her body to experiments in the medical profession while she was still living in order to help find some remedy that may help her and the other girls. I mean, she was holding out hope.
Wow.
She didn't wish to hasten her death, but she was trusting her doctors to do their best to experiment now and try to find something. And she may have wanted to maybe assuage her guilt because she had been one of the instructors in the beginning who was telling the girls to, dip it on their tongue and then do that.
Yes.
But again, only at the instruction of
Probably didn't
her
know.
bosses.
Right.
Actually, this is a quote from her. I didn't know it would harm them, she lamented. I did it myself. Then there was Edna Hussman. She also worked at 2 different radium plants. She worked at another plant called Luminite after she left USRC. And she and Catherine together, they also sued that other company for damages as well. And that claim was settled out of court.
Oh, good.
Then there was Grace Fryer. She was 27. She had dark hair, brown eyes. She had 19 operations on her jaw. And she was the driving force behind this lawsuit that sought to get legal recourse and some medical bills paid and just, get something from her employers for what they were going through. That actually led to later on other lawsuits being filed in other states as well. So we will talk about that a little bit more. But prior to that lawsuit, earlier, there was a lawsuit brought by Ella Eckert, Sarah Carlo, the one I mentioned whose leg was 4 centimeters shorter, and Marguerite Carlo. They were sisters. One resource said that Marguerite was the first that actually had filed the lawsuit. Sarah, her sister, still worked at the factory until after that lawsuit was filed. Their suit prompted the Westbury Clock Company to stop the practice of the lip pointing by their employees. But unfortunately, these 3 women died during their legal proceedings, so it didn't really go any further. So that's why now when Grace Fryer and these other 4 women bring this lawsuit, this one's the one we hear about the most because that was the bigger one. Scientists and doctors did tell the women that they were doomed to a certain death. Even Marie Curie heard of the girls' doomed diagnoses. She stated, and I quote, "I would be only too happy to give any aid that I could. However, there is absolutely no means of destroying the substance once it enters the human body." She also later said, when she was asked about their diagnosis, "I'm not a doctor, so I cannot venture an opinion on whether the girls will die. But from the newspaper descriptions of the manner in which they worked, I think it imperative to change the method of using radium."
Yes.
And as we know, Marie Curie died from radium poisoning herself in 1934, just a few years after all of this. When Grace Fryer's lawsuit was filed in May of 1927, she asked for $250,000 in damages. All 5 women asked for that same amount, so the lawsuit itself totaled like $1,250,000.
That was so much money.
That's so much money. I believe that equaled $4 million today.
Okay.
I'll have to look. I think the $250,000 each. Each one of those equaled $4 million today.
Okay.
I'll see this later in my paper. The company defended itself. Their defense was that the 2-year statute of limitations was up. But Grace...
That company just
I know.
makes me so mad.
Doesn't it? But Grace's attorney, now she had a good attorney. This Raymond Berry, he asked the court, he's like, well, you need to construe that 2-year limit from the time of their diagnosis.
Right.
Not 2 years from the time they were employed or when their disease started.
Sure.
Because who
That
knows
doesn't
when
make
that
sense.
is.
Yeah.
He pointed out, he's like, these symptoms may show up anywhere from 1 to 18 years after exposure. And he also pointed out, like, this is all new, and there's a lot of research that needs to be done before we fully understand it.
Yeah.
And so he really fought for them for that. Their lawsuit stated that the company did not explain to them the danger of the radium, all while training them to use their mouths on those brushes. Furthermore, the company did know about the risk.
Oh.
After all, the scientists and top officials of the company did use precautions when they themselves were working with the radium.
Oh, my goodness.
They used gloves, tongs, and lead aprons.
Oh, that makes me so mad.
Doesn't it?
And then they, meanwhile, instructing the girls to lick the brushes.
Yep.
So that they could churn those faces out.
Yep. And when anybody would ask about why they were using those precautions, the answer was, well, we're dealing with large amounts, but the amount that they're using in painting is minimal.
And, that adds up after that, just builds on itself.
Yes. I mean,
because it doesn't go away, right? Like,
no, like Marie Curie said, once it's there, there's nothing going to get it out.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so that
it's a cumulative.
Yeah. Oh,
it's mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling. Their attorneys, the girls' attorneys, were concerned that if this lawsuit drags out, as we know they can, that these girls are going to die before it can be settled like the other girls did. So after the initial hearing began in January of 1928, 2 of the women were bedridden, and they couldn't even return to court after that first hearing. None of the 5 could even raise their arm to swear an oath in court.
Oh, my gracious.
Yeah. And yet, court was adjourned until September because so many of the witnesses would be vacationing through the summer and wouldn't be available.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. These ladies need to be compensated before they died so that their medical expenses are covered and their families are taken care of. Well, a journalist, Walter Lippmann, he was a writer for the New York World. He brought that judge's decision to delay the court proceedings. He put that in the paper.
Good.
He said time is of the essence, and they're putting this off until September, and it caused an outrage.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Because this outrage and the headlines came out, that did persuade the New Jersey courts to reschedule the case for June.
Good.
The women began receiving sympathy letters at home along with recommendations for these quack cures.
Yeah.
One of them said, like, inject tannin.
Oh my
Like,
God.
they don't know that that's any safer. One of them said, drink mazoon. It's an old world cure, but didn't include any recipes and, just so on.
Yes.
I can hear somebody now saying, have you tried essential oils?
Right.
Just days before the case goes to court in June, the company offered Grace a settlement of $10 a week pension, settlement of her current doctor bills and lawyer bills, and her impending funeral expenses.
Oh my. What a slap in the face.
Yes. Well, she turned it down flat.
Good.
She scoffed. She said, that is absurd. I would not even consider a paltry sum of that. I sued for $250,000.
Yes.
And that's where I put that does equal over $4 million today. So she's like, no.
Good.
So then the company's legal team, they make another settlement offer. And the women whose medical situation is pretty dire at this point, they did accept this offer. They would each be given $10,000 each with a pension of $600 a year for life, in addition to past and future medical and legal expenses paid by the company. So they didn't get near what they were asking
How
for.
much a year?
$10,000. Well, they got the $10,000 one-time payment and then $600 a year. There was a judge, his name was Judge Clark, and he offered to mediate so that there could be a settlement instead of a hearing. He offered to mediate.
Okay.
And between the company and the girls. And later it turned out that he was a stockholder in the U.S. Radium Corporation.
Well.
Yeah. So
Why am I not surprised?
And where are his interests going to lie?
Sure.
That's just, yeah. It was so sensational in the media that the headlines were speculating how these women are going to use their settlements with only 1 year left to live. I mean, it seems such a insensitive headline.
Terrible thing to say. Yeah.
Also, see, the company, the girls were only given a year to live, and the company's expecting them to die quickly. So then they're off the hook for any, once that's done, they're not having to pay any more medical bills.
Sure.
And
they literally don't care about these girls.
I don't think they do. And they would not admit any fault because they didn't want any future cases to be decided on that. So they would not admit fault. And the executives even alleged that the women may have not even gotten the radium poison from them, but when they actually went to the doctor and got x-rays for their ailments, that might have caused it.
Are they serious?
Well, they're going to try what they can.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So still trying to deny fault. And they, people are saying, and they're trying to discourage these women from even seeking medical help because.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
But because that media sensation I told you about, now people in other states are hearing about it. And so over in Illinois, the Radium Dial Company, they had some tests done in their factory that did show that radium was toxic. Unfortunately, they didn't inform their employees about it.
Oh, really? Shocker there.
Yeah. But they did quietly make a small change. They gave the girls these new pens to paint with on their clocks instead of using the brushes. But they didn't tell them why. And this method with the pens, it just didn't work as well. So it was more time consuming and the girls couldn't do as much production. And so they're not making as much money. And since they didn't know radium was the problem, they just went back to using their brushes. However, because the medical problems don't stop, they continue to grow.
Yeah.
Eventually, the women do start to realize and question if they're being told the truth. Another thing happened in November of 1928. This Sabin von Soschaki, who was the inventor of radium paint, and he was the founder of that U.S. Radium Corporation, he died of radium poisoning.
Interesting.
A victim of his own invention. And although some of his testimony had actually helped the girls in their case, he went to his death denying that his paint was the cause of his illness.
Oh.
He just couldn't admit it. He actually thought that he could cure himself. So he was trying all these blood transfusions, and he assured everybody, oh, I'm going to get better. And then when he didn't, then he still just denied that it was the radium. In 1937, a decade after the first lawsuit, 5 other women who were former employees of the Radium Dial Company in Illinois filed their lawsuit against their employer for radium poisoning. That case was ruled in favor of the victims as well.
Good.
But the company appealed that decision 8 times, over and over and over, until they were finally forced to pay them.
Good.
Yeah. But all the while all those appeals are going on, workers at their plant are using the radium paint.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, while all the appeals were going on.
They should have been locked up is what they should have done.
I mean,
that's
so.
like, they're just at that point murdering people.
Yes. I mean, just unconscionable. So these lawsuits, especially that first one, and the media outcry, they were a big factor in in occupational labor laws being put into place. Surprisingly, while methods of use were changed and stricter safety precautions were put in place, radium paint was still used in dials up almost until the 1970s. There are millions of watches still out in circulation that were made before 1968. So if you have
I gotta get me one.
Yeah, if you have one, they were painted with radium paint. I thought that was really going to surprise you, but after you told about the radium glass, I'm like, oh, you're not surprised to be it. But I want to say that the glow-in-the-dark toys today, and it's made with I'm no scientist here.
Right.
From the best what I understood in the reading. It's made with not really straight out radium, but a different isotope of it that is supposedly safe. So the first lawsuit girls that were supposed to die within a year.
Yes.
A full year and 2 months later, they were still alive.
Good.
July 28th, 1929, all 5 of the women in that lawsuit are still living. The newspaper headlines said, 5 New Jersey sufferers of radium poison still cheat death.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I bet those corporate people were so mad.
Yeah.
According to that article, 2 of the women had no faith in the prediction of their deaths. That was Albina and Grace. One had just been released from the hospital, and one reported that she had become considerably worse. That was Edna Husband. They all did eventually pass from the effects of the radium, though, but it took much longer than what was thought. Quinta McDonald did not die until December of 1929. Catherine Schaub lived until 1933.
Oh,
and this lawsuit now was like 1928 when it was decided.
Okay.
Grace Fryer also lived until 1933. Edna Husband, she lived until March of 1939.
Oh, wow.
And Albina Larice lived until 1946.
Really?
Yes. And so they got that pension.
I'm so glad. Mm-hmm.
I know that one of the women, I don't remember which one it was, but one of the women did say that she was just at peace knowing that her children would be taken care of. All right. So I know what you think of the companies.
Yes.
Do you think that the whole time they knew how dangerous it really was for these women and that it was the whole time it was a cover up?
No. I think, but I don't think I think they figured it out pretty quickly. And I just think they didn't care to do anything about it because by that time they were making a fortune.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's exactly what I think. I don't think anybody really knew how dangerous it was. Mm-hmm. Because again, even that Dr. Lehman, even though the scientists there did take protective measures, then they said Dr. Lehman at times would handle it very carelessly, put some in his pocket. So had he truly known at the beginning, I don't think he would have done that.
No, and I've just seen so many articles from the 20s of how people were using it for health benefits.
Right. So many people really believed it was safe. I think they made assurances without realizing the full effect, but then you shouldn't be making assurances.
Exactly.
Especially if it's a new substance. We've seen it before also with like mercury.
Yes.
Back in the 50s, women were given a morning sickness drug. I think it was thalidomide.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And
we should do that story.
Oh, we should.
So don't tell.
I won't tell anything about it, but that's another case of something like that. And I mean, it's a legitimate question. And even today,
Of course.
a lot of people have that same question about this COVID vaccine.
Yes.
We're assured it's safe, but a lot of people, we're
How do you know?
we're not buying that.
right. Like, how do we know it's safe?
Yeah. So, some things never change. One thing that bothered me in the article in the paper, they did a write-up after von Soschaki died. They were kind of really hailing him because he was, a scientific discoverer and
Sure.
everything. And so they were hailing him as a martyr. And they said he was one of 16 martyrs for the cause. And I'm like, but wait a minute. These women did not make that choice
Right.
to die for that. He may have, but they did not.
Absolutely.
So
oh my gosh.
I did not but we know how old newspapers can be.
Yes.
Just a sign of the times during that. There were a few other things I didn't put in the story, but I just thought I might throw them out here at the end. There was this one athlete during the time before they knew. He drank radium water. He advertised for it. Imagine a Gatorade commercial.
I've read
Okay.
about that.
Okay. So imagine him doing like we see sports people doing now, their Gatorade or their Smart Water or whatever. And then in 1932, he died from it. And one article said, the radium worked fine until his jaw fell off.
Gosh. Oh my goodness.
Also, I read somewhere that, and I don't know if this is true, but I think it probably is. If you dug up all of those women's bodies today, they would still be glowing. Because they are still radioactive. Radium has a half-life of 1,600 years.
I saw in the movie, they had a tool there. And if you take it somehow reads radium levels.
Mm-hmm.
If you take it to the girls' graves,
Yes.
it's
Kind of goes off.
Yes.
Yes, I did read that. That's crazy.
Yes. That is something.
It's eerie.
It is.
I just wanted to point out that the U.S. Radium Corporation, they had science backing them up at first,
Sure.
and the belief that this scientific discovery, it backed up their methods. And so they capitalized on that.
Yes.
And sort of, we hear that today. Trust the science.
About
Trust
the medical field.
science.
Yes.
Until you find out the science is wrong.
And then it's like, oh, well, I mean, we didn't know.
Right. And then there's nothing.
And then what?
And then
then
it's too
people
late.
are dying.
It's
yeah.
too late. So instead of trust the science, so many times I'm like, how about we trust the history?
Exactly. How about we wait and see?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So I don't love the union today. I think they do a lot of stupid crap, honestly, useless stuff. And I think it's unfair. And I think it keeps people out of good jobs. But you see how things like that got started.
Yes. They have their place, I guess.
Absolutely. And definitely, I think back in those days when things were so unchecked. So it's frustrating when they're overchecked now.
Yes.
But you see in everything, there just needs to be a balance, I guess.
Yeah. And this is why.
And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Those were some hard times.
They were.
Darlene and Melody will probably win a Nobel Prize for their work in true crime podcasting. And Hard Times in True Crimes is known to the state of California to cure cancer and birth defects. So make sure you tell everybody you know, and a few people you don't, to check us out. Till next time, goodbye.